From Emory Jones, who held it down in prison for Jay-Z only to feel betrayed in the end, to DeHaven Herbie, the man who once took a bullet for him and later called him a traitor, to Diddy, now caught in federal charges that could destroy everything. Here's what really happened to Jay-Z's most dangerous allies. Let's begin with DeHaven Herbie. Our first story is perhaps the most tragic and controversial of them all. DeHaven Herbie, the childhood friend who claims he introduced Jay-Z to the drug gang. DeHaven, who's 6 months older than Jay-Z, grew up with him in the same building on the same floor in the Marcy Projects. They were inseparable. More than friends, they were brothers in every sense of the word. According to DeHaven, he was the one who taught Jay-Z the ropes of street life, including how to navigate deals and avoid risks. They hustled together in the late 1980s and early 1990s, moving cocaine from New York to places like Trenton, New Jersey, and Maryland. But here's where the story gets intense. DeHaven claims that one night during an uptown drug deal, everything went wrong.
Any issues he ever had, I handled that. From reasonable doubt, when he sit here and tell you, my man got his side sprayed up on Uptown Block, that's me. That's me with this scar from here up here. So he never had no street issues. Rob him, I'm going to see them. You understand? When I go see them got me on the floor with the guns, surrounded with the guns to my head. Behind him. Only thing saved my life is me really knowing these. They spared my life.
DeHaven was shot protecting Jay-Z, taking a bullet in the side during an ambush. He waved down a cab, gave Jay-Z the drugs and money, and told him to get his mother and meet him at the hospital. This moment, according to DeHaven, proved his ultimate loyalty. Jay-Z even referenced this incident in Dead Presidents 2 from his debut album Reasonable Doubt, rapping about his man getting his side sprayed up on an uptown block. But the real betrayal came years later. In the early 2000s, DeHaven was arrested on federal drug trafficking charges. He claims that during his trial, Jay-Z looked him in the face and promised support, saying, "Don't worry about it, bro. I got you." But then, according to DeHaven, Jay-Z completely ghosted him. No visits, no money for lawyers, no support for his family.
Look at me in my face, right? During my trial, look at me in my face telling me, yo, don't worry about it, bro. I got you. And I never see him again.
DeHaven fought his case and won, beating the charges without cooperating with authorities. But by then, the damage was done. He came home to find himself homeless and struggling while Jay-Z had become one of the biggest stars in hip-hop. The beef escalated when Jay-Z released No Hook in 2007 with the line, "Fuck DeHaven for caving. That's why we don't speak," implying DeHaven had snitched during his trial. DeHaven has consistently denied these allegations, stating in multiple interviews that he never cooperated and has no paperwork proving otherwise. The situation became even more complicated when DeHaven revealed that upon his release, he discovered Jay-Z was now partnering with Desiree Perez, DeHaven's ex-girlfriend from the early 1990s, who had become a federal informant in a major drug case and later became CEO of Roc Nation. Today, DeHaven is 55 years old and living a low-key life, appearing on podcasts and running an Instagram series called The Marcy Maid to tell his side of the story. In recent 2024 interviews, he's called Jay-Z a coward and stated that reconciliation is impossible, though he says he's forgiven him for his own peace of mind. Sean Diddy Combs. Now, we come to perhaps the most explosive and current story on this list. Sean Diddy Combs, Jay-Z's longtime friend, collaborator, and fellow mogul who is currently facing some of the most serious allegations in hip-hop history. For decades, Diddy and Jay-Z have been linked as two of the most successful figures to emerge from the streets to build entertainment empires.
It's 2020, y'all. And it's different than when it was 2016. You know, the game has been elevated. As we can tell, there's no expense being spared. We had a black billionaire's lunch.
Their relationship dates back to the late 1990s, when both were establishing themselves as not just artists, but business mogul. They collaborated on tracks, co-hosted industry events, and were frequently seen together at parties and gatherings. Their bond seemed unshakable. Two Brooklyn to Harlem kids who had conquered the music industry and built billion-dollar brands. They co-owned ventures, attended each other's celebrations, and presented a united front as Black excellence in entertainment. But in September 2024, everything changed. Diddy was arrested on federal charges of sex trafficking. racketeering, and coercion involving what prosecutors called freak-off parties dating back to 2008. The indictment painted a disturbing picture of Diddy allegedly using his power and influence to coerce women into drug-fueled sexual performances, often recorded without consent. He pleaded not guilty, but the evidence seemed overwhelming, with over 100 accusers coming forward with similar stories. Then came the bombshell that directly implicated Jay-Z. In December 2024, a civil lawsuit was amended to accuse both Diddy and Jay-Z of raping a 13-year-old girl at an after-party following the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards. The anonymous plaintiff, represented by attorney Tony Busby, claimed she was lured by a limousine driver, drugged, and then assaulted by both men, while an unnamed female celebrity watched but didn't intervene. Jay-Z's response was immediate and fierce. He denied the allegations completely, calling them heinous and accusing Busby of extortion and blackmail. His lawyer, Alex Spiro, filed a countersuit claiming Busby had demanded a settlement to keep the suit private, which Jay-Z refused, stating he would never settle false claims because it would only encourage more false accusations against celebrities. Jay-Z emphasized that he had never been close friends with Diddy despite their public appearances together. Diddy still remains in federal custody, awaiting trial on the original criminal charges. Meanwhile, Jay-Z has tried to distance himself publicly, with his lawyer stating in interviews that despite decades of public friendship, they aren't close friends. A claim many find hard to believe given their documented history of collaborations, parties, and business ventures together. Emory Vegas Jones. Now here's a story with a different ending, one that shows what happens when loyalty goes both ways. Emory Jones, nicknamed Vegas for his flashy style, met Jay-Z around 1989 during their prime hustling days in Brooklyn and New Jersey. They were deep in the cocaine trade, with Jones handling logistics and distribution alongside Jay-Z.
Who is Emory Jones? Who is Emory Jones?
Humble soul, that's who I am. Just a humble soul that just happened to have a great best friend and brother named Jay-Z as part of the story.
Jay-Z idolized Jones's business acumen and loyalty, referencing him in tracks like Allure as a figure who exemplified both the rewards and dangers of the street life. Jones was part of Jay-Z's inner circle as he transitioned into music, providing that crucial street credibility to early RocAFella ventures. But unlike the Haven story, this one takes a very different turn. In the early 2000s, Jones was arrested on federal drug trafficking charges related to cocaine distribution. He was sentenced to approximately 16 years in prison in 2003, serving time in facilities like FCI Fort Dix. Now, here's where the story diverges dramatically from DeHaven's experience. Jay-Z demonstrated rare loyalty throughout Jones's entire incarceration. During Jones's time behind bars, Jay-Z visited him multiple times, sent financial support to his family, and even referenced his plight in his lyrics to keep his name alive. This wasn't just talk. Jay-Z literally kept Jones's name relevant in the culture while he was locked away, ensuring that when he came home, there would be opportunities waiting. Jones has openly discussed this in interviews, saying that Jay-Z's actions during his darkest hours proved he was solid and that their bond was unbreakable. This loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was practical and life-changing. When Jones was released around 2019 after benefiting from sentencing reforms and good behavior, he didn't come home to nothing. Instead, he was immediately brought into the Roc Nation family. Today, at around 55 years old, Emory Jones is thriving as the head of Roc Nation's apparel division. He's launched incredibly successful collaborations, including a Puma partnership that resulted in his own signature sneaker line in 2023, something almost unheard of for someone who isn't an athlete or entertainer. His work emphasizes themes of redemption, second chances, and betting on yourself, which is literally the name of his signature project, Notorious B.I. When we talk about Jay-Z's Deadliest affiliates, we have to address the Notorious B.I., born Christopher Wallace, one of his earliest and most influential connections in hip-hop. Biggie and Jay-Z were both Brooklyn natives trying to make it in the rap game during the early 1990s, and their relationship was complex.
plans for
part
them
friendship,
to form a supergroup
part
called
rivalry,
The Commission,
but always
along
respectful.
with other top-tier
They
rappers,
collaborated
which would
on the
have been one of
legendary
most
track
formidable
Brooklyn's
crews in
Finest
hip-hop
from
history,
Jay-Z's
given their
debut
street
album,
credibility and
Reasonable
talent.
Doubt,
However,
in
their
1996,
relationship wasn't without tension,
a song
as
that
both of their
showcased
careers
both of their
accelerated.
lyrical
There were
abilities
rumors of
and
competition
cemented their
and
status as
underlying
two of
friction.
Brooklyn's
Biggie
best.
was already a superstar
There were
with
even
Bad Boy
plans for them to
Records,
form
while
a
Jay-Z was
supergroup
still
called The
grinding with
Commission,
his independent
along with other
RocAFella
top-tier
label. Some
rappers,
accounts suggest
which would
their
have been one of the
relationship had
most
begun to
formidable
sour
crews in
over
hip-hop
territorial
history,
issues
given their
and the
street
natural
credibility and
competitiveness of
talent.
two alpha
However,
males
their
vying for
relationship
the
wasn't
crown of
without
New York's
tension.
best rapper.
As
Then
both
came
of
the
their
tragedy
careers
that shook
accelerated,
hip-hop to
there
its
were
core.
rumors of
On March
competition
9th,
and underlying
1997,
friction.
Biggie was
Biggie
gunned
was
down in
already a
drive-by
superstar
shooting
with
in
Bad
Los
Boy
Angeles,
Records.
leaving a Soul Train
While
Music
Jay-Z
Awards
was still
party. He
grinding
was
with
just
his
24
independent
years old
RocAFella
at the
label,
absolute peak of
some
his
accounts
powers,
suggest
with his
their
album Life
relationship
After
had
Death
begun to
about
sour
drop.
over
The murder
territorial
happened
issues
amid
and the natural
infamous East Coast, West
competitiveness of
Coast
two
rap
alpha
feud that
males
had
vying
already
for the
claimed
crown of New
Tupac
York's
Shakur
best
6
rapper.
months earlier.
Then
His work
came the
emphasizes
tragedy that
themes
shook
of
hip-hop
redemption,
to its
second
core.
chances, and betting bars.
On March
Jay
9,
visited him
1997,
multiple times,
Biggie was gunned
sent
down in a
financial
drive-by
support to his
shooting in Los
family, and
Angeles,
even referenced
leaving
his
a
plight
Soul
in his
Train Music
earliest
Awards
and most
party.
influential
He was
connections
just
in
24
hip-hop.
years
Biggie
old
and
at the
Jay-Z were both
absolute
Brooklyn
peak of his
natives
powers
trying
with
to
his
make it in
album
the
Life
Raw
After
Wings
Death,
record.
about
They
to drop.
collaborated on the legendary
The murder
track
happened amid
Brooklyn's
the
Finest
infamous
from
East Coast
Jay-Z's
West
debut,
Coast rap
6,
feud
a song
that had already
showcased
claimed
both of their
Tupac
lyrical
Shakur 6
abilities
months
and
earlier.
cemented their
It
status
was
as
like, I went from, like shocked. I was just couldn't believe it. Like, I just got finished talking to this man on the phone. Like, it wasn't even, he's in the club, like having the time of his life, It was just like that. Yeah, it just couldn't happen.
The killing remains officially unsolved, though. Theories abound, linking it to rivalries involving Death Row Records, Suge Knight, and the ongoing coastal beef that had turned deadly. What made it even more tragic was that Biggie had traveled to Los Angeles trying to promote peace in his new album, Not Looking for Trouble. He was ambushed at a red light, shot multiple times, and died shortly after at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. For Jay-Z, Biggie's death was a pivotal moment. He has paid tribute to Biggie numerous times in his music, honoring his legacy and acknowledging their connection. But there's always been speculation about Jay-Z's role, or lack thereof, in the East-West beef. Some have questioned whether he could have done more to prevent the escalation, while others have suggested he benefited from Biggie's death by filling the void left by Brooklyn's king, Calvin Clean Beek. Moving deeper into Jay-Z's past, we need to talk about Calvin Beek, known as Clean, a name that might not ring bells for casual fans, but was absolutely legendary in 1980s Brooklyn. Klein wasn't just another hustler. He was a notorious drug kingpin who Jay-Z looked up to as a big brother figure and mentor in the game. Starting around 1989, Jay-Z began hustling under Klein's wing, learning the intricacies of scaling operations and evading law enforcement. Klein's operation was massive, involving stick-ups and large-scale cocaine distribution before he linked up with the young Sean Carter. The relationship was so impactful that Jay-Z immortalized Clean in multiple songs, most famously in Allure, where he raps about riding shotgun in Klein's green BMW 5 Series, and in December 4th, where he portrays Klein as a symbol of the addictive nature of street life. Klein's influence on Jay-Z went beyond just drug dealing tactics. He represented a lifestyle, a level of success in the streets that seemed untouchable at the time. Klein taught Jay-Z about presentation, about carrying yourself like a boss, even when the cops were circling. That Kleinic name itself was a nod to the designer brand Calvin Klein, reflecting his stylish demeanor and his approach to the game. Everything had to look good. Everything had to be calculated. But like so many in that era, Klein's empire eventually crumbled in the 1990s. He faced multiple arrests and was eventually convicted on drug and weapons charges, beginning a prison sentence that would last over a decade starting around 1994. During one particular bust, there are claims that Jay-Z was allegedly present but managed to escape charges, with some suggesting that Klein took the fall to protect him. Thought this has never been definitively proven. What's interesting about Klein's story compared to others on this list is that he doesn't harbor the same level of resentment. Released in the mid-2000s, Klein transitioned to legitimate work, appearing in documentaries and doing interviews about his past life. He even had a brief acting stint, including Errol in the 2002 film Paid in Full, which dramatized the era they all lived through. In his interviews, particularly a detailed 2014 Vlad TV series, Klein speaks about his partnership with Jay-Z with a sense of pride rather than bitterness. He praises Jay-Z's intelligence and business acumen, acknowledging that even back then, you could see Sean Carter was destined for something bigger than the streets. Kleinhaus noted that the game's dangers, the constant threat of violence, imprisonment, or death, made his time behind bars feel like a blessing in disguise because it ultimately saved his life. Kareem Biggs Burke. Now, we're getting into the business side of Jay-Z's affiliates, and Kareem Burke, known as Biggs, represents one of the most important partnerships in hip-hop history. Biggs was one of Jay-Z's closest business affiliates and co-founded RocAFella Records in 1994 alongside Jay-Z and Damon Dash. But before the music empire, Burke had his own reputation in the streets. Biggs was involved in street hustling with Jay-Z, and crucially, he provided seed money from drug profits to launch the label. His deadly reputation stemmed from his low-key, but influential role in the cocaine trade during the late 1980s and early 1990s. While he wasn't as flashy as some others, Biggs' street connections and business sense made him invaluable in funding early ventures like RocAwear clothing, which would eventually become a multi-million-dollar brand. For years, everything seemed perfect. RocAFella became one of the most successful independent labels in hip-hop, releasing classic albums and building an empire that extended far beyond music. But Biggs' past eventually caught up with him in a major way. In 2010, Biggs was arrested as part of Operation Green Venom, a massive federal investigation targeting a marijuana trafficking ring that spanned multiple states. This wasn't some small-time operation. We're talking about a sophisticated network moving hundreds of kilograms of marijuana across state lines. Burke pleaded guilty to conspiring to distribute over 100 kilos of marijuana and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison in 2012. What happened during those 5 years is actually quite remarkable. Burke served his time in facilities like USP Canaan, using his incarceration for deep self-reflection. He found religion giving his life to Christ. And when he participated in a 2017 Reddit AMA after his release, he spoke openly about his spiritual transformation and the lessons he learned behind bars. Released in 2016, Burke immediately sought to distance himself from the drama that had plagued RocAFella. In multiple 2025 interviews on platforms like Drink Champs, he clarified something crucial. The 2004 split, when Jay-Z sold RocAFella to Def Jam, wasn't actually a hostile breakup as media had portrayed it. According to Biggs, it was a planned exit that made business sense at the time, though the execution and aftermath created tensions. Today, in his 50s, Biggs has completely reinvented himself. He focuses on philanthropy, launched a luxury fashion brand, and dedicates significant time to mentoring young entrepreneurs in legitimate business. Dame Dash. When we talk about Jay-Z's affiliates, we absolutely have to address Damon Dash. Even though he wasn't strictly from the streets in the same way as others on this list, Dame was a hustler in a different sense. He had roots in Harlem, street culture, but his real gift was in business and promotion. Together with Jay-Z and Biggs Burke, they co-founded RocAFella Records in 1995. And Dame's aggressive entrepreneurial spirit was instrumental in the label's early success. Dame was the CEO, the face of the operation, Theone making noise while Jay-Z focused on the music. He secured distribution deals, negotiated with bigger labels, and built RocAFella's reputation as an independent force that played by its own rules. They expanded into fashion with RocAwear film production with RocAFella Films and seemed unstoppable throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, but cracks began to show. The problem started around 2004 when Jay-Z sold his stake in RocAFella Records to Def Jam and became president of the larger label. Dame felt betrayed, believing Jay-Z had essentially dismantled what they built together. From Dame's perspective, Jay-Z chose corporate America over the independence they'd fought for. And worse, he did it in a way that left Dame and Biggs on the outside looking in. The fallout was messy in public. Dame accused Jay-Z of being disloyal and going corporate, while Jay-Z's camp suggested Dame's erratic behavior and poor business decisions made the split inevitable. What followed was years of subliminal dices and interviews with Dame becoming, increasingly, vocal about feeling used and discarded once he was no longer useful to Jay-Z's ascension. Things got worse financially for Dame. He filed for bankruptcy in 2015, losing significant assets and facing multiple lawsuits. His relationship with Jay-Z didn't just cost him a business partner. It effectively shut him out of many opportunities in the industry, as few wanted to take sides against someone as powerful as Jay-Z had become. There were legal battles over RocAFella, disputes about master recordings, and a general sense that Dame had been systematically pushed out of everything they'd built together. As recently as 2024, Dame has called Jay-Z ruthless in interviews, accusing him of blocking his business ventures and using his power to ensure Dame couldn't rise again. He's spoken about how Jay-Z's team would allegedly interfere with deals he was trying to make, how doors would mysteriously close once people learned he was attached to a project, and how the industry essentially blackballed him at Jay-Z's behest. Lanson Rivera, our story takes us to one of the most shocking and well-documented incidents in Jay-Z's life: the 1999 stabbing of record executive Lanson Rivera at a nightclub party, an attack that nearly killed Rivera and resulted in Jay-Z's only criminal conviction. The incident occurred at a Kit Kat Club party celebrating the release of Q-Tip's album Amplified on December 9, 1999. Jay's was already a platinum-selling artist, riding high on the success of Volume 2, Hard Knock Life. But he was about to drop Volume 3, Life in Times of S. Carter, and was paranoid about bootleggers. According to accounts, Jay-Z suspected Rivera of being behind the bootlegging of his upcoming album, which was devastating to artists in that pre-streaming era because it could kill album sales. When Jay-Z spotted Rivera at the party, tensions immediately flared. What happened next became the stuff of hip-hop legend. Jay-Z stabbed Rivera in the stomach and back, causing serious injuries that required emergency medical treatment and stitches. The wound was deep enough that it could have been fatal if it had struck vital organs. The attack was witnessed by multiple people, and the aftermath was captured by news cameras as Rivera was rushed to the hospital. Jay-Z initially filled the scene, but turned himself into police the next day, accompanied by his lawyer. He was charged with assault and initially pleaded not guilty, maintaining he was innocent. However, as the case progressed and evidence mounted, including witness testimony and the severity of Rivera's injuries, Jay's changed his plea in 2001, admitting guilt to third-degree assault. He received 3 years of probation, the lightest possible sentence that allowed him to avoid jail time and continue his music career. In his 2010 memoir Decoded, Jay-Z addressed the incident, calling it a loss of control and expressing regret for letting his emotions override his judgment. He acknowledged that the stabbing was amendment of street mentality overtaking his business sense, a reminder that no matter how successful he'd become, these streets were still in him. It was a wake-up call that could have derailed everything he'd built. Rivera, for his part, survived and eventually moved on with his life. He went on to produce films like The Perfect Holiday and work in the entertainment industry, though the stabbing remained a defining moment in both men's lives. Interestingly, in 2023, Rivera recanted his testimony, claiming that Jay-Z wasn't actually Theon who stabbed him and that he'd taken the fall for someone else, a claim that Nas had actually made back in his diss track Ether in 2001, suggesting Jay-Z was protecting another member of his crew. Rivera has spoken about eventually forgiving Jay-Z, saying he understood the paranoia and pressure of that era. Jazz O, born Jonathan Burks, was Jay-Z's early mentor in hip-hop, the person who gave him his first real exposure to the rap game. While Jazzo wasn't deeply involved in the street hustling to the same degree as others on this list, his relationship with Jay-Z is important because it established a pattern that would repeat throughout Jay-Z's career, using people for what they offered, then discarding them when they were no longer useful. In the late 1980s, Jazzo was already an established rapper on the underground scene, and he took the young Sean Carter under his wing. He gave Jay-Z his stage name, a variation of Jazzo's own name, brought him on tour, including a trip to London in 1988, and featured him on tracks to help build his reputation. Jazzo taught Jay-Z about stage presence, how to structure verses, and essentially how to be a professional rapper beyond just freestyle battles in the streets. For a while, they were tight. Jay-Z served as Jazzo's hype man, learning the business while getting exposure to audiences. Buddhist Jay-Z's skills developed and opportunities arose, the relationship began to shift. By the mid-1990s, when Jay-Z co-founded RocAFella Records, he essentially moved on from Jazzo without bringing him along for the ride. The specific breaking point is unclear, but it likely involved business and ego. Jazzo felt disrespected, believing Jay owed him more for the early support and mentorship. From Jay-Z's perspective, he'd outgrown Jazzo and didn't owe him a career just because they'd worked together years earlier. The tension simmered for years before exploding publicly. In the mid-2000s, Jazzo released several diss tracks aimed at Jay-Z, including Get Your Proper Papper and Love Is Lost, accusing him of being disloyal and forgetting where he came from. The tracks were harsh, personal attacks that detailed their history, and suggested Jay-Z had used him as a stepping stone. Jay-Z characteristically didn't respond directly in music, instead letting his success speak for itself and treating Jazzo's attacks as beneath acknowledgement. What made the situation worse for Jazzo was that he was right about being forgotten. Jay rarely mentioned him in interviews or gave him credit for his early influence, instead focusing on other figures when discussing his come-up. It was as if those years never happened. A eraser that clearly stung Jazzo deeply. Today, Jazzo is alive and occasionally releases music, but he's largely a forgotten figure in hip-hop despite his legitimate contributions to Jay-Z's early development. Calvin, Uncle Buzz. Calvin, known as Uncle Buzz, is another figure who played a crucial role. Both has been largely written out of Jay-Z's official history. Uncle Buzz was DeHaven Herbie's actual uncle and was already established in Trenton, New Jersey when the crew expanded their operations there in the early 1990s.
My Uncle Buzz, like he had this police look with him, right? So he was easier to move up and down the highway. You know what I'm saying? Police, we'd be in a whole nother car, but the police would look at my uncle and be like, man, this nigga like the police. He keep going. He just had a police look.
Uncle Buzz's role was specifically logistical and transportation-based because he had what DeHaven described as a police look, presumably meaning he appeared clean-cut, professional, and non-threatening. He was perfect for moving product up and down the interstate without drawing suspicion. The crew operated out of DeHaven's aunt's house in Trenton, where Uncle Buzz already lived, creating a family operation that provided a level of trust and security crucial for their activities. This was the same house where Jay-Z would eventually live for extended periods, moving from weekends to weeks to essentially becoming a permanent resident until he committed fully to music. DeHaven has referenced him as one of the Silent Kings, people who played crucial roles but never received recognition or acknowledgement for their contributions. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.